Council President of String Theory School, Nick Dreckett. So, yes, thanks.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Nick Dreckett. I am the student president here at String Theory Schools. We are so honored to host the candidate forum for District Attorney in Philadelphia. Safety and crime are two important things for families and students here in Philly. And we are so excited that we are able to be a part of this. So we thank you all. Thank you. Alan Williams.
Hi, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Alan Williams. I'm the president of the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. I just have a 45-minute speech prepared. You're welcome. In all seriousness, wanted to thank District Attorney Krasner and Judge Dugan for giving time for this event tonight. Obviously, it's really important that we get to know the opinions and the platforms of all of our elected officials. The association was started back in 1962 with the mission of advancing the cultural, economic, and social wellness of people who live in the Logan Square neighborhood sort of catchment. We've been talking a lot more this year about how our neighborhood can play a role in the broader Philadelphia city community, right? And not just always be about the individual in our local neighborhood, but how can we help advance those same mission and those same values for people throughout the city. And so events like this that bring people from all over the city together to learn about, again, our elected officials is super important to us, so we're excited. I want to give thanks also to the planning committee that worked on getting this event together. And I also would like a big round of applause for Mr. Drew Murray, who had leadership for this event. Great. All right. Well, it is now my pleasure to introduce one of our co-moderators for tonight. She is the publisher of the Philadelphia Sunday Sun, which is one of our sponsors, Kathy Hicks.
Can you all hear me now? Yes, okay. Sorry about that. But again, voting is one of our most important obligations. So we always want to make sure that we have what we need to make a conscious decision as to who we want to represent us. And part of that is what the Philadelphia Sunday Sun does. I am the publisher, but we are based out of Germantown, but we are tri-state, so we're all throughout the community. Follow us on philasun.com. If you haven't seen our paper, follow us on philasun.com, and you'll go to all of our social media platforms to see what we're doing. So thank you.
And hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Christella. I'm the president and CEO of the Committee of 70. We are a 121-year-old nonpartisan, nonprofit, good government group based here in Philadelphia, serving the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I want to thank the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, the Crosstown Coalition, the Philadelphia Sunday Sun, and String Theory Schools for hosting this forum and inviting me and Kathy here to moderate tonight's forum with our candidates running for Philadelphia District Attorney. One of our most popular resources at the Committee of 70 is our How Philly Works guide. Hopefully somebody has seen it here. Thank you. And it explains all the details of how Philly works. And one of the good definitions it has in there is exactly what the heck a district attorney does. So I'll read directly from the book. The district attorney is the elected leader of the district attorney's office, the DAO, which is responsible for the prosecution of criminal cases that occur in the city of Philadelphia. With more than 600 lawyers, the DAO is the largest prosecutor's office in Pennsylvania and the third largest in the country. The DAO is divided into various divisions and units, each responsible for specific types of crimes or stages of the legal process. The DAO has significant discretion in deciding what crimes will be prosecuted and what charges will be brought against defendants in those cases. All right, so please join me in welcoming the two candidates seeking this important office. The first, our incumbent, District Attorney Larry Krasner. And former Municipal Court Judge Patrick Dugan. Tonight's forum gives voters the chance to hear directly from the district attorney candidates about their vision, priority, and policies for the office and for the city of Philadelphia. Our goal tonight is a fair, informative discussion to help you make an informed choice at the polls. Now let's go over some ground rules. All right. Number one, this is a forum, not a debate. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to introduce yourself. Each candidate will then be asked the same questions. We will alternate who goes first to answer each question. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer the question. After the first candidate answers a question, the second candidate's time will start. We will then move on to the next question. In the last 15 minutes, there will be a series of yes or no questions. That's why we have the handy dandy paddles up here. And then after that, each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for closing remarks. You are officers of the court. Let's focus on the issues, not each other. Voters deserve to hear your plans and why you are the best choice to serve as Philadelphia's district attorneys. Do you agree to this structure? Thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Then let's get started. Kathy has our first question.
All right. So our first question
No
for this
introduction?
evening.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
3 minutes each.
All right, don't start that till the microphone works. Hello?
There we go.
All right, here we go. So I'm Pat Dugan. I was a judge till December. I absolutely loved being a judge for 17 years. I'm a lifelong Philadelphian. Logan Square has a good spot in my heart. I used to swim in that fountain when I was a kid. I was born in Fairmount. Between that and the Art Museum pools, those who've been around for a while, they used to have water in those coming down the Art Museum steps. That's where I swam, or it was the fire plug. So my mother wanted to move on up, so we moved up to Margaret Orthodox when I was about 10 years old, single mother. Was blessed enough to go to the prep on a merit need scholarship. The nun made me take the test. She paid the $10. So I went to the prep. It was a great blessing. But I still had to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. So I went in the Army, used that GI Bill to finish college, go to law school. But I want to touch on one thing when I was a kid at 22nd and Parish, sitting on the steps. This is one of the things that made me who I am and why I have jumped into this after sitting on a bench, the job that I loved for 17 years. It was in the 60s. You had all those police barricades. There was all kinds of tension in the streets, those big yellow police barricades. A young kid riding his bike, a little boy of color, was being chased by some of our neighbors, the old heads. They were teenagers. I'm 6 or 7. And they caught him, and they had that board. And as they started to beat him, my mother stood up, ran down, and got in the middle of what they were doing to that young man. She stopped him. She pushed him away, put herself in danger, brought that kid back to our steps with the bike, and waited for the police to arrive. That was what I grew up with. My mother didn't have to say anything else to me. That is who I've tried to be my entire life. You got to be accountable. You got to get in there and help people. And that's what I did for 17 years on the bench. I was involved with some diversion programs that were beyond a peer. We just were so much better, a national model. Other jurisdictions came in to see what we did in Veterans Court. I've done eviction diversion program. That was me. I go into the prisons to talk to prisoners with newer veterans, newer defendants, so that they don't go in there. I stepped down because what I saw the last 7 years, I'm telling you, just stepped me to the max. So at times, 70% withdrawal rate. I had to step down to get involved. That's why I stepped down to run for DA. I am here to enforce 2 terms. I believe in term limits. I'm here trying to make that happen this time. Thank you.
Good evening. So if I stand up, it's only because I spent 30 years as a trial lawyer trying cases from the little to the huge. And I just find it easier to speak, and I can tell a lot of you probably can't see me. And of course, I invite the judge to do that as well if he chooses to do so. My biography is kind of well known, but I'll keep it real quick, and then I want to talk about whether we are safer and freer than we were, because we are. I want to get there, but let us start with the beginning. Born in St. Louis, went to inner city schools in St. Louis, public schools, came to the Philadelphia area, lived a few different places, public schools here, all the way up. My parents were very, very hardworking people, very idealistic people. My mother was actually an evangelist, having gone to Asbury Theological Seminary. My father was the child of Jewish immigrants from the Ukraine. And after he volunteered and served in World War II, came back, the GI Bill put him through school. He went to Columbia University in New York City, became an author and a writer. And later in his life, curiously, we're at the old home of GlaxoSmithKline. He actually worked for SmithKline for a minute as a writer. But later in his life, he became severely disabled. He had acute arthritis to the point where his hips were removed and replaced, and the replacements failed. And he spent 25 years of his life with nothing, connecting his pelvis to the upper part of his thigh on both sides. Also contracted osteomyelitis in the process, which is a pretty rough thing to have. But anyway, the consequence of this was that during much of my high school, he was physically disabled. We were living off Social Security. That is the reality. And I say that not to say I had it so bad, because I had wonderful parents, but that I do understand a little bit what it means, and I'm sure the judge does too. I'm not trying to draw a distinction, but I understand a little bit what it means to have X dollars for food for the week for a family. I used to do that shopping for them. I understand a little bit what it means to want to go to school but know that you don't have any money that's coming from home to get you through college and get you through law school. I did end up going to college in Chicago. I went to law school in California. I came back here, and I came back here fundamentally because I met my wife, with whom I'm still happily married. At least I'm happy. You can ask her. But I met her in law school, and we both wanted to do public interest work, and we both found dream jobs. In Philadelphia, mine was starting out as a public defender and then a federal public defender. Somewhere in there, I really got interested in defending people who were engaging in nonviolent protests to try to change society. I can get into that later, but it became a professional hobby of mine for most of my 30 years as a defense lawyer and a civil rights lawyer. I thought it was important. I was a trial lawyer. I was in court 4 to 5 days a week. I was doing everything. I was doing homicides. I was court appointed to do death penalty cases for mentally ill people who couldn't afford representation. I also represented kids who were drinking underage. I did all of those things, and it was an opportunity not just to spend a year in jail, which I did, visiting people, witnesses, defendants, et cetera, and hearing about their lives, but it was also an opportunity to watch cases and to handle cases. And the consequence of that is at a certain point, at age 56, 30 years in, I decided to run for DA. We're going to talk about that. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start with our first question, and that would be Judge Dugan. Who? Okay, then we'll. DA Krasner will go first. All right, so the first question is, what is the #1 job of the Philadelphia District Attorney?
So the #1 job of the Philadelphia District Attorney, the oath itself, is to seek justice. That's the oath. It's not just to prosecute people. It's not to consider this a basketball game where you want the most points. It is to seek justice, and obviously justice means not just consequences for people who do terrible things. It also means preventing those terrible things. It means making a country that is already the most heavily incarcerated big country in the world, and also one of the most violent countries in the world. It means improving both of those things. Safer and freer. Safer and freer. Here are the facts. The number of homicides this morning was 43. It is, this, as best I can tell, it is the second lowest number of homicides in 50 years. The last time we were this low was 2013, when there were 39 rather than 41. We have a level of homicides at this point that is essentially saving the lives of 2 people every 3 days. Why do I say that? Well, because you don't see lives that are saved. You see people who are killed. At the height of the pandemic, or if you go back to when Ron Castile was DA and we had 500 homicides that year, you're looking at about 1.5 people killed per day, or 3 people killed in 2 days. 3 people. Now it's 1. Every 3 days, every day, there is someone who in the history of Philadelphia at the bad times was murdered. And they're not murdered now, thank goodness. That is just one of the indicators of whether we're going in the right direction with crime. If you look at the Philadelphia Police Department's publicly available data, in 16 out of 18 categories, crime is down. And yet at the same time, today, we have only about 3,700 people in county prison. And during the bad old days of prior administrations, we were just shy of 10,000. 10,000 to 3,700 is a lot more freedom. And what I already told you is a lot more safety. We have them at the same time, and that is a positive direction to be going.
So I go to same question?
Yes, same
All right,
question.
so to me, the job of the district attorney is to enforce the law, to hold people accountable, but at the same time to have some common sense about diversion programs, second chances, and all that. And that's what I've done as a judge. I led my court in expungements. I've done the diversion. When we're talking about the murder rate, I was looking at this and it really jumped out at me. If you pull out your phones and just Google murder rate Philadelphia 2015 to present. So in 15 it was 280, 277 the next year, 315. In 2018, first year of D.A. Krasner, 353. These are people, by the way. 499 in 2020, 562, 516, 410. Last year was 269, right? So right now, crime is down because we're going to, frankly, pre-Larry numbers. We're back to what we were before he became the DA. So all this drop and all these percentages, we can manipulate all kinds of numbers. Retail theft, I'm sorry, but people should be held accountable. The lady who's stealing, Pampers and formula, we got to work a program out for her. But these folks who've been going in after the policy, strictly the policy by Larry Krasner, not the law. The law says you need to be held accountable. $499 and below. It's a memo from him in 2018. Retail theft went from $7,000 a year up to $20,000, and the arrest rate went from 20% back in just before he started to 2%. 2% of 20,000 people committing retail thefts. Businesses are leaving us, and these young people who are doing it feel they can do whatever they want. We need to hold them accountable. Be smart about it.
All right, our next question. A January 16th, 2025 Philadelphia Inquirer article stated, for more than half a century, government officials and researchers have concluded that confining youth in institutions leads to worse outcomes, lower graduation rates, worse employment outcomes, more recidivism, and later a greater risk of adult incarceration. What is your plan as district attorney to break the cycle of recidivism for juveniles? Judge Dugan?
It's me?
Yep.
So obviously we need to start younger. We need to make sure that the government, the city, the state, and the national government, it's starting when they're babies, helping families, because children who grow up and become involved in the criminal justice system, when we peel that layer, that onion away, we peel it back, we find out there was so much trauma, the parents needed help, the child needed help early. So we need schools like the ones that right here for all our children to have that opportunity. And we have to consider children when they come into the system as children. That should be the starting point. When I first started practicing law, one of the things that I did, I got involved with child advocacy. And I was one of those child advocates who would go into the home, because you got to know who these kids are when you're standing in front of a judge to determine what we should be doing, what kind of plan we should have. That's what I was doing. We need to do more of that. Now, not all that falls on the district attorney's office. Unfortunately, some of these young people that are out there and they're walking around and they're shooting 4 or 5 people, I mean, they have to be held accountable. But the vast majority that come in the system, we need to treat them as children, but we need to give it as much restorative, rehabilitative opportunities as we can. We need you, and we need you to get involved, to be mentors. Whether they're in first grade, you're coming to help them read, you're helping that family out that's down the street, we have to do it together. Can be honest with you, as a judge, I've done some direct juvenile files, but I haven't been that involved in juvenile justice, and it's one of those things that I want to talk to the community and the experts to come together and see how we could do this better.
Okay, same question. What is your plan as district attorney to break the cycle of recidivism for juveniles?
The plan is underway. We have reduced the number of juveniles who are in jail-like settings by 70%. At one point, we were up to 80%. That was necessary. They were in snake pit facilities that cost, get this, over $200,000 a year, and yet resulted in high recidivism, poor education, et cetera, et cetera. It's a real and serious problem. We have also very substantially grown the different programming that is there to rehabilitate youth who do things that are not so serious. There are many more options available in terms of diversion for juveniles than used to be there. And I will also say this, I am blessed to have as a first assistant a guy named Robert Listenby. For those of you who don't know Mr. Listenby, now 76 years old. He not only has an entire career in juvenile justice, he was at one point the chief of the Public Defender's Juvenile Unit, and he was Barack Obama's pick to run juvenile justice for the United States of America in his second term. He ran the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for 4 years, okay? I'm not looking for experts, I have them, and they know what they're doing. We have a remarkable thing going, so remarkable that we've tried to expand it into young adults. U.S. Supreme Court recognizes the brain is not fully developed until you're about 25. That means we can't just stop on your 18th birthday. So we started something that was never here before. It's called the Emerging Adult Unit, which similarly has a wide range of educational, treatment, job training options for young adults who get involved in adult cases. They need to be rehabilitated too. And what we have found with these programs, the Emerging Adult Unit, many of our juvenile diversionary programs, is really good results. Having said that, there are juveniles who kill people, and they're going to have their cases, in many, many instances, almost all of them, resolved in adult court. One size does not fit all here, but we have to be very individual in what we do, especially when it comes to juveniles and young adults.
All right, thank you. So your next question is, according to a July 22nd, 2024 Inquirer article, retail theft arrests had nearly tripled that year. This shift in arrests occurred after a change in the district attorney's office policy from 2018 that directed prosecutors to charge most thefts involving merchandise valued at less than $500 as a summary offense. What is your plan to help reduce retail theft so that companies like Wawa do not continue their exodus from Center City, Philadelphia, and Philadelphia as a whole? D.A. Krasner.
Thank you. Well, I think it's very important that we get false narratives out of the way. It has never, ever, ever been the policy of the DA's office that we do not prosecute under $500. It may have been repeated, just like people say elephants are blue, but actually elephants are not blue, and that was never, ever our policy. The policy was, in appropriate cases, to prosecute as a summary rather than a misdemeanor. A summary offense can put you in jail for 90 days. If you've never been to jail, you don't want to be there. It is still a criminal offense. That was the policy that we had initially. That has changed somewhat. But we're not planning, we planned. The fact is today that if you look at your Philadelphia Police Department data, you'll see that retail theft is down this year 8.5%. If you look at the last 20 days, you'll find out it's down more than 13%. And that is partly the result of the fact that we started a retail theft and house theft task force with the police department and with merchants some time ago. Wawa closing stores? No, that's not actually true. Look at the Philadelphia Inquirer article in which they looked at this, and they found that the 2 stores that were closed in Center City did not have high levels of reporting crime. They had low profits. And that other stores that had high levels of crime and high profits stayed open. We got to talk about what's real here, not talk about a bunch of shenanigans and politics around what's really going on. This has been a favorite talking point of some people, but that don't make it true. They should also be talking about the fact that we had more homeless people in the United States last year than any prior year, about the fact that we have a massive opioid addiction problem that the U.S. government has failed to remedy, that giant pharmaceutical companies that have poisoned us and been the most prolific drug dealers of all time have not been held accountable, either in civil court or in criminal court. There is a perfect storm here that we need to address. But the good news is that with the help of this task force, now over a year old, we're seeing things go in a better direction. I have more to say, but we'll wait. Thank you.
So yeah, the police department has a report, the Philadelphia Police Department Retail Thefts Analysis from 2014 to 24. Like I said before, 7,397 the first year, and there was 24%, these are retail thefts, a 24% arrest rate. No, I apologize, 6%. 6%. It was 23 the year before, prior to Larry. In 21, it was 2%. In 22, it was 2.5%. So the policy, an executive order right here, dated 2/15/2018, Google it, you can read it yourself. In there, it talks about everything below $4.99. Yes, he says it can be a ticket. I want to meet the last person who got 90 days for a summary offense for retail theft. But if you're letting 20,000 incidents go free, the LPOs stopped. They did not stop. People were coming in and just taking. The police didn't respond if they did. The workers get fired. Wawa's, CVS's, Home Depots, and corner stores have had thousands of incidents a month in their stores. So yeah, the economy and corporate and all that, you can't sustain a business. Why are we letting these people come in and just take? I pay when I go in. I mean, when you're standing in Best Buy and a guy walks out with a TV, how do you feel about that? Shouldn't we hold those people accountable? And we haven't. And then the stats are right here. It's his policy. Again, an executive order. Because the law says this isn't what it should be. Who else does executive orders? Who's a one-man legislature? Who is the other guy that does this? This was for prostitution as well. So, I mean, come on.
We're really going to test that no rebuttal thing here. This is good. Okay, next question. What action will you take to protect the city and its residents from possible illegal actions by the federal government? Judge Dugan, this is to you.
Illegal actions by the federal government. And I know we're going to hear that we have all these ways of stopping it. I'm waiting to see how we're going to be able to do it, because I'm not sure what we can actually do. The federal government's going to come in here, and I mean, the ICE is coming in here, and how do I stop an ICE agent from taking somebody? I don't know. I really don't know how we can do that. We have to continue to push back on what's coming at us, but I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I have solutions that I'm going to be able to tell the federal government to stay out. I can say it, but can I actually, what am I going to do? Are the police going to stand there when the ICE agents come here? Is that what's going to happen? Because there's no way that's going to happen. I'm not going to give you rhetoric on this. I'm just hoping that we can politically get them to stop what the heck they're doing. We have to push back on them. But I mean, realistically, is there really something that we could do standing out there? Yeah, you know what? We could do it as a people, standing out there arm in arm and do it that way peacefully. But I just don't know what the solution is. And I know I'm going to hear a professorship and all this stuff that's going to happen. In reality, there's pretty much nothing that we really can do other than through the political demonstrations, push back. And again, if there's something that I could do, I will do it, no matter who it is that's coming in here to do some harm to our citizens.
I guess I have more faith in the judiciary than the judge. So here's the thing. Donald Trump comes into office, he picks up a napkin, he writes on the back of it, "I'm ending birthright citizenship." Oh, are you? There's this thing called the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that says you are not. And yes, I do know what we're going to do. The judiciary has already said, no, you're not. You are not ending birthright citizenship. It is part of the 14th Amendment, the most essential amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That's what we do. We actually assert our legal rights. We don't pretend that a king is a king. I have not been endorsed by the Republican Party in this Democratic primary, but my opponent seems to be getting loving words on social media from Philadelphia's Republican Party. What do you think that means in the context of I don't know what we're going to do? Let me tell you what else we're going to do. ICE is going to do what they are legally allowed to do, but they don't have a whole lot of people. They only got 20,000 agents all across the country, which is only 3 times the Philadelphia police force, okay? Roughly, that's what it is. There's a 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that the president cannot order local law enforcement to enforce federal law. They cannot order the police department to do it. They better not even try to order me to do it. And I am not going to be part of a mass deportation of hardworking, law-abiding people who have come here seeking a better life. Yes, I will get in the way of that, but I don't have to violate one law to do it. I don't have to hook arms with other people. I don't have to block anything. We just have to use the United States Constitution. If an ICE agent comes here and follows the law, I would not interfere with that. If an ICE agent comes here and thinks that because he's got a maniac in the White House, he can start kicking children and he can start dragging people out of their homes illegally, then I'm going to charge him. And I'm going to prosecute him the same way that I have been willing to prosecute that small number of police officers who commit crimes, and we have done so in ways that are historic and unprecedented. We will do the same. Simply put, they can F around and find out.
All right. Our next question is, what steps would you take? Oh, no. Yeah, what's that? Yes. What steps would you take to protect the First Amendment rights of people living in Philadelphia to peacefully assemble, protest, and speak on any issue? D.A. Krasner.
Well, this one is near and dear to my heart. As you may know, I worked for free for 25 years, representing people who tried to change society for the better through nonviolent means without engaging in property destruction. And we have made it very clear from the beginning that this is not Lynn Abraham's DA's office. You remember, we had the Democratic Convention in the year 2000. 420 people were arrested, frankly, for nothing. 99% of those charges resulted in not guilties. 98% of those people were acquitted. I spent 4 years with a hardy group of other attorneys working for free to make sure that is what happened. That is not this office. Kevin Bethel, our commissioner, knows that. He respects that. And that's why when we had a situation, for example, the one at Penn, where you had an encampment, he resolved it in a way that made a whole lot of sense with the support of the mayor, with my support, which is that people who were camped out there were not given criminal charges. They were given civil citations. So they didn't develop criminal records all over all of this stuff. If they actually committed crimes, that's a whole separate question. But that's how it was handled. I could not be more dedicated to the protection of First Amendment rights, and that includes free speech, freedom of assembly. It also includes freedom of religion, another issue that we may have with ICE. And yes, I intend to protect churches. If we're going to start raiding churches, then we're going to have a real talk about it. That is another one of the amendments that protects us from some of the crazier tendencies of this president. But look, this is something I've proved time and time again. Let's be honest. I wouldn't be DA if it hadn't been for the fact that I spent so many years representing activists for free who were just trying to do the right thing. And those activists became city council people, city council staffers, secretary of labor for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They became lawyers. They became prosecutors. They became public defenders. They became doctors. They ended up doing great things, but they did them because they weren't convicted for simply being good and patriotic citizens.
All right, Judge Dugan, same question.
So, for the most part, I can't disagree what most of what Larry just said. In 2010, actually, he was a defense counsel in front of me, him and Paul Hetznegger, and they had a group of defendants, and this judge found those folks not guilty. They were out there, they were laying down in front of the casino down on Delaware Avenue, and both Mr. Krasner and Mr. Hetznegger were, praising me in a newspaper for my decision. I'll continue to be that type of person as a district attorney. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is the F around and find out. I completely understand that. I just wish this district attorney would actually say that to the man who's out there with an AK-47 shooting a store owner with a 7.62 round and then offering 3.5 years. Why aren't we a guy's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, sold his store, moved out of the city, and really wasn't contacted for some of the hearings. He was still in the hospital. So F around and find out, walk in the streets of Philadelphia with an AK-47 is what I will say. We could do things smartly for low-level crimes. I got no problem with that. We got to give second chances. I made a career out of that. But we have to address these folks getting 4, 5, 6 chances, running around with handguns and killing our kids. It's ludicrous. So could we at least once say F around and find out for running the streets of Philadelphia with an AK-47? Trump the boogeyman, yes, I get it. But come on, the bigger picture in here is the safety. When we go out to our cars tonight, are you worried about walking to your car? Do you let your kids walk to the corner store? That's what we need to say. F around and mess with my kid, and you're going to find out. That's what should be coming out of the DA's office for those people who continue to be violent on our streets.
All right, question to Judge Dugan. A good relationship between the district attorney, the mayor, and the Fraternal Order of Police is paramount for a successful and safe Philadelphia. What are your plans to build and maintain those relationships?
Not be the smartest person in the room. For 5 years, I was the president judge of municipal court. And with that, I was in all those big meetings with all players like that, the police commissioner, the mayor, city council, Department of Behavioral Health, the managing director, community leaders, CJAB, it's a criminal justice board that everybody gets together, and we try to figure out what are the solutions to gun violence, perhaps the drug epidemic, this criminal issue over here, and we would sit around and try to be collaborative. And I'm telling you, this is one of the main reasons why I stepped down, because most people, we could come to some sort of agreement. We need to go this way or that way. Generally speaking, almost every time there was one dissenter, because it's got to be his way or no way, and that was our DA. The mayor and the police commissioner are part of the reason why the strategies are starting to work with some of the crime rates going down. I know they're not going to come out publicly and say this, but there's no cooperation. There's not enough cooperation with the district attorney's office. The director of safety, Adam Gear, works for the mayor. At a forum we were recently at, Larry actually said, I don't work for the mayor. I believe you're both part of the executive branch. There's got to be some cooperation. She can't tell you what to do, but shouldn't we work with her? She ran on trying to make our city safer, be a little bit tougher on crime, community policing. Why aren't we sitting down and cooperating? And I'm telling you, it hasn't happened. It didn't happen the 5 years that I was in that office as the president judge. So what will I do? I'll play better in the sandbox. We'll talk. We'll try to work together. We'll try to do these collaborative efforts. Listen to other people's ideas.
That would be layers of inaccuracy, and I say that respectfully. The reason I wasn't in meetings with the judge after a certain point is because he wouldn't meet. And by the way, all this I left because I was so upset about what's happening in the DA's office. He left and ran for Superior Court first. He finished 3rd out of 3 very recently. All right, I mean, he didn't, I'm sorry. We're okay? Okay. I mean, Come on now. Here's the reality. The reality is I'm not the one who was bear hugging John McNesby when he was the head of the FOP and defending the visible wearing of Nazi tattoos. Judge Dugan was. And he was doing that in
Larry,
front of,
you gotta be
you
kidding
were
me.
doing it, and
You
he was
gotta be
doing it
kidding
in, yes, you were, and he was doing it in front of the DA's office, in front of the Mr.
You're
Softy
such
truck.
a liar. I'm
Bec-
sorry. Don't you say that to me.
Okay, well, it's
I
true.
was hugging John McNesby with his Nazi tattoos. That's a lie.
That's not what I said.
I'm sorry.
I said you were hugging John McNesby, who defended the visible wearing of Nazi tattoos. That is what he did, okay? And yes, you were hugging him, and yes, you were doing it in front of the Mr. Softy truck that he arranged to be there. Let's just talk about what's real. Now, having said
Judge Dugan, please.
that, here's the reality. There's a new head of the FOP who's wonderful. He's not some Trumpy, hurrah for Nazi tattoos guy, and his name is Roosevelt Poplar. He is the first African-American head of the FOP. He has been a good partner with me from the beginning, and he is not endorsing Judge Dugan. For the first time in my entire life, the FOP is not endorsing the more conservative candidate for DA. What does that tell you? Second, Kevin Bethel and I, Commissioner Bethel, we talk all the time. He has been an excellent partner. So have other police commissioners in the past. We have gotten rid of the biggest problem, and his name was John McNesby. I can give you a whole lot more details on it, but let's remember McNesby's the guy who was around when we had the peak in officers not showing up for court with phony designation as being injured on duty by the doctors McNesby picked. Now we have a real head of the FOP, and we have people showing up. I meet with the mayor and I get along well. Just look at any of the press conferences. I would certainly like to meet
Your
more,
time.
but I think we're doing fine. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next question. Do you plan to continue the Conviction Integrity Unit in its current form? Why or why not? D.A. Krasner.
So the Conviction Integrity Unit is the unit that is responsible at this point for about 45 exonerations of people, nearly all of whom had nothing to do with the crime that put them in jail for decades. These are people who were either given death sentences or life sentences in almost every instance and sat in jail for decades. Why? Because some of the police and some of the prosecutors who prosecuted them cheated. That's why. Because they lied, cheated, and stole. They had evidence that would have benefited the defense, and they did not turn it over. That is intolerable to me. That is unacceptable to me. And what's even more unacceptable is the reality that whenever you put an innocent person in jail, the one who committed the terrible crime gets away. I see you shaking your head. Ronnie Byrd, ever heard that name? Go ask Anthony Wright. He did 28 years for a crime committed by Ronnie Byrd. Ronnie Byrd's DNA was connected to that crime towards the end of that situation, and that is a classic example of the kind of culture that existed in the DA's office and that was allowed by the DA's office in terms of policing in that era. We are a completely different stripe. We take our obligation to give the defense what they should have extremely seriously. If we think people are innocent, we drop those cases. They don't even go to trial. You're not going to find yourself with a whole bunch of $10 million lawsuits down the road from what we do, because we make absolutely every effort, including modern databases, to ensure that we don't have mistakes in this regard. That is how seriously we take it. The only thing slowing us down at this point, frankly, is that we need more resources. We have about 1,000 applications at any given time. We have fewer than 10 lawyers. We have tried repeatedly to get more funding. And if we can get it, whether it's from grants or it's from the city, it's something that we want to do. But it is intolerable to have innocent people sitting in jail while the guilty ones who've committed terrible crimes go on to do more of them. Of all of the counties in the country, Philadelphia had the second most exonerations in the United States last year. That's how seriously we take that.
So who else just name calls their enemies, the people they don't agree with? Everybody that disagrees with this man is a Nazi. That's what he said to all the attorneys that left, that got fired. So now I'm hugging guys who love Nazis. That's nonsense. Read the Inquirer, folks. Above the fold the other day, a judge said his office held evidence in one of these conviction integrity cases. That judge ordered the district attorney's office, every single DA in the office, to take 12 hours of continuing legal education. You can read about it. With an emphasis on candor to the court, lack of integrity. I think that's a street word for lying. Judge Goldberg, a federal judge, said the same thing. A person who killed 2 people, including a minister, and left a baby to die there was convicted, sent to jail. Conviction Integrity Unit, let's do due diligence. Let's do evidentiary hearings. Judge Goldberg said, wait a minute. You didn't talk to the victim? That little girl's now an adult. They didn't talk to her. Are you kidding me? They said that the guy who did the killings was a model prisoner. He actually got shot while he tried to escape, had all these infractions. The judge was upset about the integrity from the DA's office. Judge Meehan said, you wouldn't know justice if it slapped you in the face. Judge Bromson, Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice, said the DA takes a knee. Judge after judge is questioning integrity. Patricia Cummings, who helped start the unit, wouldn't come to court last week because she was going to plead the 5th. But I will tell you this. I will keep the Conviction Integrity Unit, but we will do it better. We will do it better because we need to free any innocent person in jail or somebody who's been put in there with corruption. But come on, judge after judge calling your office liars, withholding evidence, the same thing that you're accusing those Nazis of.
Okay.
I'm sorry for yelling.
According to data from the District Attorney's Office data dashboard, firearm possession by a prohibited person, cases to date this year have been dismissed, withdrawn at a rate of 54%. What is your plan to improve this statistic?
I understand there is a no rebuttal rule, so I'm not going to rebut. But, there comes a point where there's so many layers of inaccuracy and untruth. I hope in the next forum that we do, we will have the opportunity to rebut rather than list a bunch of Republican or right-wing judges who used to work in the DA's office, whose opinions are in no way representative of the many, 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 many judges who have praised us and validated the work that we've done in the Conviction Integrity Unit. I hope to get there. And I'm sorry, your question?
What is your plan to improve the 54% dismissal and withdrawn rate for the firearm possession by a prohibited
Well, I think
person?
it's important to understand what is included there. What is included there are cases in which there was an illegal search, and that does happen. Judges are obligated to throw out a case if there is an illegal search. We've had an infrastructure problem for a long time that this commissioner is trying to fix, which is that it takes way too long to get a warrant to search a car, something that is required in Pennsylvania. Are we responsible if there's an illegal search that occurs, or are we just doing our duty to uphold the Constitution when a judge says I'm throwing it out? What about the people who are basically not criminal, have gun possession offenses, and are diverted? They're put into diversion. Our diversion program has proven to be much more successful with public safety than convicting people of gun possession, because the recidivism that comes out of the conviction is 4 people for every 1 person getting rearrested with diversion. That reads as a dismissal, but it fails to capture the reality that there's all of this accountability that is going on. What about this point? The Pennsylvania House studied sentences across the state. Guess which county had the longest sentences for gun possession when the conviction was achieved? Philadelphia had the longest sentences. Go look it up. Those are not my friends necessarily. Go look it up. That's the reality. So we need to understand what these things actually mean. When police officers don't come in or a civilian witness doesn't come in and we've done everything we can, it is not as simple as just saying, well, gee whiz, it's all up to the DA. We will continue to work hard on this.
If you go to that dashboard, you also see the violent crimes withdrawn at 61%. Property crimes, it's about 69%. And again, that's one of the reasons why I stepped down, because at times withdrawal rates in the city of Philadelphia in criminal court is 70%. Part of the problem is lack of training. There's a young man named Thomas Mandraki who worked for the DAs. When he left, he wrote a scathing op-ed saying, when I went to training, it was nothing more than a seminar about how we should feel good. And when he went into court, he wasn't prepared. He talked about his co-worker, Virginia Hansen, who said she was ill-prepared to go to court. All she would do was cry. She had a peer who would go to the bathroom and vomit. That's because they're not trained. The DA's office used to have a very substantial training for DAs. You're a new DA, and you're not being trained. The database was wiped out. It doesn't make sense. Are we going to put a new player on a team? We're not going to give them the playbook. We're not going to have practice. That's what's going on. I saw that. The attorneys that are in there, and God bless, some of them really mean well, but some of them just have no clue what they're doing, and they're getting beat up every single day by defense counsel. As a judge, I can only do so much, and I was so frustrated that we're just leaving them hanging out to dry. Because you know who else is being left hanging out to dry? You, the victims. So our victims are not being contacted. And I ask DAs every day, did you reach out to the victim? Open up your file. And there's nothing in the file that anybody called them. Sometimes I said, call them, and they actually call them and they answer the phone. The withdrawal rates have a lot to do with not communicating with the witnesses. Mothers who've lost their children will tell you, many of them have not been communicated with by the district attorney's office. They form groups to complain about it. It's victims' rights is a law, and we're failing to do that as a district attorney's office. We have to do better.
All right, next question. According to data from District Attorney's Office Data Dashboard, carjacking cases to date this year have been dismissed, withdrawn at a rate of 77%. What is your plan to improve this statistic? D.A. Krasner. Okay, I'm sorry. Judge Dugan?
Train my DAs. Actually have district attorneys, new district attorneys have mentors, have senior district attorneys to come so that they can lean on. That's one of the things that young district attorneys are talking about. I'm left hanging out to dry. They need mentors and supervisors. When I first started on the bench, there was always a supervisor lurking, 2 or 3 attorneys in the room, or 2 attorneys, and they were there, one more senior than the other, so you can lean on them. And the candles burned all night over in that office as these professionals got together and tried to work on each other. These new ones, by the way, who come from all over the country. We did, national hires were done. It sounds like a great plan, but there was one year, 78 new hires, 68 of them have already left because they're so upset about what's going on, the training, how they're going to court, they're getting beat up, they're losing everything. We need to do better. So I plan on hiring locally. I want kids from Temple, Villanova, Rutgers, Drexel, Widener. I'll also take the kid from Harvard or the kid from Stanford, but I'm not going to go around the world and just recruit them and block off many of the folks that are here in Philadelphia because they're invested. They know that Broad Street is Broad Street, and many of us judges have heard called 14th Street or Front Street called First Street. So that's even worse when they don't know the neighborhoods. Geographic senior district attorneys. I will assign district attorneys to each police district so that they can communicate directly with that community about that heinous crime on their corner, so that that district attorney can communicate about, hey, that crime is here 2 weeks from now in court. That doesn't happen anymore, folks. It did 7 years ago. That stopped because of a new regime. Somebody else was in charge. I'll bring back some of that.
Number one, carjacking is way, way, way down, and it's way, way, way down in part. That's the data. That's the data. That's not the anecdata in which we just come up with random stories about how we feel and what we saw. That's the data. Carjacking is way, way, way down. So are 16 out of 18 categories of crime in Philadelphia at this point. It's amazing that we're doing so much better when, according to the judge, we're so incompetent. But let's talk about where this whole narrative comes from, where it actually comes from, okay? So here's the reality. We came into an office where we wanted diversity of all types, religion, language, race, everything. And it wasn't happening in Philly. So we knew that in order to get the most talented people and to increase that diversity, which we have done in every single category, not white people, I'm one of them, but in every other category we have done, we traveled around the country. We have gone to 30 different law schools. These young lawyers who are being maligned by a judge who sits in misdemeanor court, understand what that means. That means he gets the brand new lawyers. They go to municipal court first. They're not doing felonies there. They're doing felony preliminary hearings and misdemeanor trials. So he's seeing all the youngest lawyers. It'd be nice if he helped them instead of just coming here to malign them. But it is also true that our training is far more extensive than it ever was under the prior administration. It is weeks longer. It begins after Labor Day. We pay them and train them as lawyers before they even pass the bar. How about this one? The judge wants us just to recruit in Philadelphia, even though he went to Rutgers. That's what he wants us to do, okay? Well, if that's the case, or close, as he puts it, which HBCU law schools in Philadelphia or nearby, Judge? Who's that? Because there's 6 of them. And if your point is we shouldn't go to any historically black college and university law schools, then you're making your point. But I have a different point, which is that I actually think we should go to Texas, where people speak Spanish, or they may speak Vietnamese. We should go to HBCU law schools, and we should hire the best and the brightest, which is what we've done. And you should stop maligning them. They don't need you as a boss mistreating them like that.
Don't call me a racist, Lar. Don't call me a racist. Don't give me those whisper words. Don't you dare.
All right.
That's what you're calling me.
Don't make me use my mom voice. That's what I'm going to say. All right. Crime has decreased since its high of 2020 to 2022. In your opinion, what has led to this decrease? D.A. Krasner.
You know, the honest answer, and we actually believe in honest answers, is that we had a horrific moment with the pandemic. Any criminologist will tell you all the data, and all the data is we had the biggest increase and the biggest decrease in violent crime and gun violence in 5 years in U.S. history. That's what happened. It happened all over the country. It was a consequence of our, frankly, too small investment in things that proactively prevent crime going away. Organized sports disappeared for the first time in my lifetime for years during the pandemic. So did summer camp. So did job programs. So did in-class learning. My son was a school teacher in this period, and he went through it. We didn't just see problems with crime. We saw a 500% increase in eating disorders. We saw 1 out of 4 teenagers in high school considering suicide in the last 30 days. We saw, after 30 years of traffic deaths declining, that it started to go back up. We saw sweeping and horrific impact to the isolation, the fear, the disease, the deaths. That certainly had an impact all over the country. But here's the most important part. Because it's one thing to ride the wave, and it's another thing to be ahead of the wave. The most important part is that after we hit our peak and the country hit its peak, in the middle of the pandemic, all the big cities started to get safer, okay? So first, the average of the big cities was an 8% improvement in public safety. We improved 11. The next year, it was a 13% improvement in public safety. We improved 20. The next year, which was last year, it was a 23% average improvement among big cities. We improved 35. And right now, if you look at your phone, you'll see that we're even better than that. We're down another 35 or so percent over that. The news last year was correct when it said Philadelphia, despite being the poorest of the 10 largest cities, is leading the nation among big cities. We're not the caboose on this train, we're the locomotive. And we're the locomotive because there has been good cooperation between PPD, within government, but also with community-based organizations that we support in trying to get this under control.
What was that question? I'm sorry.
Crime has decreased since its high of 2020 to 2022. In your opinion, what led to this decrease?
I think most recently it's got a lot to do with Mayor Parker and Commissioner Bethel, because if you look at all the other crime increases, who was there was Larry and another administration. So I do have to address the pretty much a blatant call me as a racist. I just think that's crazy. You like to call people names. Who else does that? In another world, we're sitting here on a couch. Somewhere else, there might be a different kind of problem to call me a racist like that. I don't want to say some of my best friends are minorities, but you have to come look at my family. We're a very blended, United Nations type of family, and I take offense to that. I have two children. I had to have those conversations about when you're driving, about putting your hands on the steering wheel when you get stopped, or when immigration is coming around. Like just these personal attacks on me about professionally. Okay, that's fine, but you know, Nazi loving and insinuating I'm a racist. That's just way too low. In terms of your district attorneys, go back and ask them, because for the 17 years I sat on the bench, I bring those young attorneys back in chambers, and we talk about some of the things that went on, both the public defenders and the DAs. I used to go over to the office and actually try to talk to the young DAs, you know, formally. That since has stopped. So I just, you know, when we get down to those personal attacks, it's annoying. But I have tried to do that with the district attorneys. So crime is down more because of the strategies from the safety director's office, the mayor, and Commissioner Bethel. If you would actually work together with them, I'm sure we'd be a lot better. But I don't know if they'll ever go on the record that you really don't. You've come dragging it. You've been dragged and pulled and screaming recently because it's election year.
All right, next question. What can the district attorney's office do to help with the problem of illegal dirt bikes and ATVs plaguing the streets of our city and creating dangerous situations for drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians? Yes.
Well, we seem to have started to do a little bit better. And again, I think that has a lot to do with the mayor and the commissioner. So I think we have to confiscate the bikes, the ATVs. If they're illegal on the street, we have to just take them. It would be nice if we could find a good place for them to do this, so that there was a safe place for people to use these, the ATVs, the dirt bikes, these car meetups. We have to get a little bit better on social media so we could try to stop it before it happens. It's one of those things where we have to talk to the community. Does the community like that this is occurring? And obviously the community doesn't. We have this invention that's called a drone. Why don't we deploy some drones up there to assist in the police department so we can grab these folks who are doing this? Because it's not like they're just riding down the street obeying traffic laws. They're coming up on the pavement. They're putting our neighbors in danger. We have to enforce the laws as they are right now. We can't just allow people to continue to break the rule of law. And that's what's been going on, in my opinion, and many other people's opinion, and I think some people in this room probably feel that as well, for the last 7 years. These nuisance crimes are important to us. Now, okay, so again, we get that kid who's he's a stellar person other than riding his dirt bike up and down the street, putting people in danger. We need to figure out how we can channel that and help him. I have no problem with that. But we do have laws on the books where we could take them, destroy them, whatever it is. If they don't own it, they don't have the proper paper. But we can't continue to allow people to do donuts in the middle of the street, to wreak havoc up and down the neighborhood. And you know what? This is a citywide problem. It's not just down here when it gets hot. It's everywhere you hear these complaints. So, yeah, we have to come up with a much better plan. But I think we have some technology that we can help along with it.
So, you know, I hope you are carefully noting what my opponent has to say about what I supposedly said. Because it does matter that you have a DA who will not stretch the truth about what was said and what was not said. It is important that you have someone who will not mislead you for his own benefit or to advance his own career. I leave it to you to determine whether the things that my opponent is claiming I said are actually what I said, or whether he's spinning it the way he wants to spin it. I have been involved intensively with meetings with the police department now for a few years about the very, very difficult problem of dirt bikes and ATVs. Police are in a difficult situation because if they do roadblocks of people who are charging up and down Broad Street, or if they start chasing these vehicles, there's a tremendous risk, especially with dirt bikes, which can frankly go over all kinds of things, including at times cars, there's tremendous danger of a woman who is pushing a child in a baby carriage being killed in the process. They're in a tough spot, and we should not be picking on them for that. On the occasions when they have been able to make arrests, we have vigorously prosecuted them. Just one you may remember involved someone on a dirt bike who decided to kick in the back window of a car when he had an encounter with another vehicle. We prosecuted him vigorously. He should be prosecuted vigorously. And the police are doing a number of things, which I'm not at liberty to talk to you about, but you could probably figure out, to try to infiltrate these groups, understand the codes they use, beyond the frequencies with which they are using headsets to try to deal with it. It's also drifting. It's not just ATVs. It's not just bikes. It's also cars and the mayhem that they are causing as well. Look, these are difficult things for them to deal with because you don't want to start killing people left and right in the chase. But I am actually confident that between Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, who I think is a wonderful deputy commissioner and has a lot to do with these things, and the work of Commissioner Bethel, that we're going to have more of these arrests, and as we do, we will have more successful and vigorous prosecutions of these cases.
Great. How will you work with the city and organizations when it comes to lowering the number of unhoused residents? It's to DA Krasner.
Wow, what a great question. The New York Times reported that last year we had more unhoused people in the United States than any year in United States history. And as you, of course, know, the right, conservatives, our Republican friends, would like to criminalize that too. How dare you sleep in public when you have nowhere to sleep? How dare you have mental health issues when we've destroyed 85% of the mental health system to build prisons? How dare you do that? This is what our conservatives already do, always do. They want to hang on to their money, and the best way to hang on to their money is to criminalize everything that bothers them and push it to the side. What are we going to do? We are going to try to address the underlying issues. I am here to work with the city, with the mayor, on all solutions that are possible. But what we're not going to do is ignore a public health approach, ignore a housing approach, and to her credit, the mayor, whom I like, has been talking at great length about affordable housing, building 30,000 units of affordable housing. It's something that we need. The reality is, if you look at successful drug treatment programs around the world, and I have visited one in particular, people get off drugs much better when they're housed. When they're living on the street, the conditions are so miserable and things available to them, it's just not going to work out. So, it tends to address a number of problems. If you have affordable housing, you don't necessarily need to be stealing all the time. If you're stealing because you are taking drugs, because you have mental illness, and we can get you into treatment, we can take away your reason to want to steal. All of these are interconnected problems, and we have a bit of a perfect storm here between the out-of-control addiction issues, the issues of being unhoused, mental health issues that have not been addressed because we abandoned a public health approach to these issues that has been successful in other countries and in other states. If we can just get back to using the resources, not to criminalize everything, but to deal with the public health issues with a public health approach, that's where we need to go.
So yes, we need to step up a lot better. All of us need to step up to help the unhoused. The government has to step up, not just the district attorney's office, but the city, the state, and national need to step up. Charitable organizations need to step up and help these folks. But when we allow things to get out of hand, and let's just say, for example, Kensington Avenue, all those folks up there are on drugs. Many of them have mental health problems. If they didn't, they do now. And all we've allowed them to do is overdose at a high rate. We used to have a very robust community court. We have alternative misdemeanor program with the cooperation of the district attorney's office and the public defender, the mental health specialist. AMP Court used to work so well. We had a partnership, and we would help those people who were having issues. We would have a nurse, a mental health specialist on site in a court at 3901 Whitaker. And you know what? It's back a little bit more, but we used to be very robust. When Larry became the district attorney, I was excited. I was saying we could do this, instead of doing it 5 days a week, we could do it 10 days a week. So we'll put 2 judges and handle all these folks who have these problems because society is not helping them. So if we can bring them in and help them with treatment, we had programs where we would help them find housing. Some of them went to community service and got jobs. We helped people go to substance abuse treatment, reunify with their family, etc. So we had these robust systems where, yes, sometimes we can actually help them instead of just leaving them there withering to die. And that's kind of what's been happening. And yes, we could do better. The courts and the district attorney's office can partner on this. I'm not talking about putting people in jail. I'm talking about getting them some help. And we've done it. We could do better.
All right, next question. As head of an office with more than 700 staff members, how do you or how will you motivate your staff to execute your vision for the office? Judge Dugan.
Certainly we'll try to keep a better retention rate, and that's about morale. So I've done this. I was a president judge in lowly municipal court. Hundreds of thousands of cases come through there, by the way. 3 divisions, 3 buildings, over 300 employees, over $10 million budget. I know it's not the $50 million budget, but we were very effective, a very effective court. And we had pretty darn good morale in Philadelphia Municipal Court. So I would continue to bring the leadership that I had as the president judge. Basically, I say I was a wartime president because when I first got there, we had a computer incursion. Then we had COVID. Oh, by the way, my leadership skills, I was a paratrooper, by the way. I went into the prisons during COVID. This judge, when we were all scared at home, I was going to work, I went into the prisons because the men in prison and women were stuck in jail while the world stopped. I wanted them to have their hearings. I went into the prison. The victims and the witnesses, they were piped in via TV. I was the first judge that went in. Other judges who worked with me, they volunteered to come up there. Eventually, some more came up there. So these are the things. I'm going to lead from the front. I'm going to go around and make sure, what do you need? I'm going to make sure that senior assistant district attorneys are mentoring the new ones. So they're not saying, I'm going to go in the bathroom and puke. Because these aren't my words, folks. This is what was documented by these people writing letters about it. So, and yes, I will recruit locally, and I'll take the Howard University grads. And yeah, I went to Rutgers, Camden. Oh boy, I'm sorry I said the wrong word. The local law schools, I want to recruit them. I want the office to look like the city as well. But they need leadership to stay, and they're not getting it. And that's why it's been in disarray for the last 7 years.
So once again, we're going to malign a lot of young attorneys, incredibly talented attorneys from all over the country that could have gone to law firms and made $212,000 straight out of law school, and they came to the DA's office to work for 70 because they believed that we should be safer and freer, and we are safer and freer. That's how we're going to lead? Well, I suggest if you want to know about leadership, look at this. It was just said to you, gee whiz, we're going to have better retention. My retention is better than Seth Williams. I have the data. I'm not just throwing out stuff. I have the data. My retention is better than Seth Williams. During the pandemic, when all law firms and all public law entities were having a terribly hard time, our retention was better than big law. Check it out. Legal Intelligencer showed a 50% attrition rate over 5 years. In big law, we were at 40%. We're paying way less, and we're keeping people longer. These are just words. You need a district attorney who doesn't just throw out words. You need a district attorney who knows facts, who will present you with facts. I'm glad to hear that Howard is okay now. That is one of the 6 historically black college and university law schools in the country. It's also where a woman I hired who went to Central and then went to Howard came from. We hired her. Here she is in her 7th year, I think her 7th year, and she's the chief of major trials. And she's the youngest one we've had, and she's a superstar. Those are the people I'm hiring. Those are the people who are being maligned by someone who says that he's going to lead from the front. How about this? As long as we're talking about leadership and it is being represented to us that the municipal court was a happy place. I'm sure some of it was. Why don't you talk to some of the other municipal court judges? Why don't you do that? And why don't you talk to some of them who don't come from the same background as me or as Judge Dugan, who don't have similar last names, who are different in other ways? Why don't you talk to some of them? The new leadership in MC I have found incredibly easy to work with, and that is the Honorable Karen Simmons and the Honorable Joffe Pittman. So I suggest, before we simply accept these vacant words one more time, that you go and you check.
All right. That concludes our long answer portion of the evening, and we're going to go to our yes-no format, so paddles in hand, gentlemen. Kathy will alternate. Does that sound good? I'll ask a question, you
Yes.
ask a question? Go for it.
All right, so the yes and no questions. Is Saquon Barkley the best single season Eagles running back of all time?
All right. All right. Will you file lawsuits against the federal government to recover federal grant money that was awarded during the previous administration?
All right. Do you believe in the use of restorative justice programs for certain offenses?
Right. Do you support the expansion of diversion programs for individuals with mental health issues?
Are you committed to addressing racial disparities in the criminal justice system?
Right. Will the Phillies win the 2025 World Series?
I'm a Phillies fan. Come on.
Oh my God.
All right.
I want them to, but we never know.
Do you believe that victims' rights should be prioritized in prosecutorial decisions?
Are you in favor of seeking the death penalty in capital cases?
Will the United States win the World Cup next year as North America and Philadelphia play hosts?
Eternal optimist. All right. Do you support the use of bail reform to ensure fairness in pretrial detention?
Would you consider the potential for rehabilitation when deciding whether to prosecute a case?
Do you believe that a district attorney should be transparent about their office's decision-making process?
All right. Is the correct pronunciation of water?
All right. Do you think that plea bargaining plays an essential role in the criminal justice system?
Do you support community-based initiatives for crime prevention?
Right. Would you advocate for the use of technology to improve the efficiency of your office?
Would you prioritize protecting the rights of the accused in your prosecutorial decisions?
And finally, whiz-wit.
Oh, you said whiz-wit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no, I'm whiz-wit out, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it. I don't like onions.
All right, that concludes our speed round. Round of applause. We will now give each candidate 2 minutes to conclude, to give their closing remarks. Who went first? Okay, so let's go with Dear President.
I want to take an opportunity to say some good things about my opponent because there are some good things that are true and they should be said. Number one, he had a veterans court. I think it's important. These courts exist all over the country, but they're important. If I had any criticism at all, it would be, can we do it bigger? And that's not even a criticism. That's a request. I appreciate that work. I think it's important. It's something that goes on today. It goes on every week, even though the judge has retired. But I think it's very important. It's also true what he said about how he acquitted a bunch of protesters when we were talking about that 99% acquittal rate, et cetera. I'm not going to tell you that I disagreed with the judge's rulings all the time. I agreed with many of his rulings. I did not at all agree with his ruling in the Josie case, and I encourage you to read up on that because it was reported nationally and internationally, and there's video out there, and I think you should see it. But I'm not going to tell you that everything this judge did is bad or everything that he did is perfect. The reality is there's some good things to say about him, and I hope that rather than have a campaign in which a lot of young people who are very talented and don't deserve it, I hope we have a campaign where they're not maligned all the time with a bunch of anecdata and no actual specifics about what's going on, because I think that's a disappointment. I think it's a disappointment from what I expected, because I did have a cordial relationship with the judge when he was on the bench and when I was an attorney in those rooms. So I do look forward to a robust exchange of ideas during this campaign. I think it's important that people pay attention to who is pointing to facts and who is throwing around accusations without any particular support, because we cannot afford to have another DA who is driven by ambition, who is willing to do more than they should and cross lines in order to win cases that should not be won, whose decisions on a case, for example, involving a police officer, are driven by politics. We have to be able to do what this administration has done, the difficult things that seem unpopular but are the right things to do. It is my hope to get another term so I can continue to do that. Thank you.
Well, I'm surprised you complimented this Nazi-loving man standing here. So I'm sorry, but I'm not making this stuff up. It was the DA's policy on retail theft. I really worry about the integrity. Just look at what the judges have said. And again, go look at all these. But saying that that judge is this and that judge is that, again, who does that sound like? Who does that really sound like? And it just really concerns me. Some 68 out of 78 DAs have left the office in one class, and I have tried to work with those DAs. There are some very fine young men and women who work in that office still, no doubt about it. But there are so many that have no clue what they're doing, and I want to make it better. I want to make it better because I want it to be safer for you. I want it to be safer for your children. I want it to be safer for you to walk through your neighborhood, to go to the corner store. But I also want people need to be held accountable. Again, you can't just walk into a store and take whatever the heck you want. That policy is a direct result of what was going on in his executive order that he put out there. So that I don't understand. It's right here in black and white. That's why I'm shuffling these papers up here, because this is what he says to me. It's just rhetoric. It's, where you getting that from? I'm getting it from the newspaper. I'm getting it from the dashboard. So I'm a native Philadelphian, and I care more about this city to make sure that we can go in the right direction, because I just feel the last 7 years that we haven't. And I do restorative justice, I do rehabilitative justice, but people have to be accountable. We can do both at the same time. We can do better, and I'm here to enforce term limits. District attorneys should only have 2 terms, and when I win this, I'll go to city council and ask them, hey, let's change this. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate everybody coming out here. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our event. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to my co-moderator, Kathy Hicks. And check out ballot.70.org for all your election needs. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you both.